Hi, Rachel. Are you there? Hello.
Hey, I'm back.
Hey,
Good
this
morning.
is, yes,
Good
this is
morning.
the right one. This is the right one now. I got it to figure out. So we just need to
Okay.
find Marlene.
Well, she told me to check your message, and so I went out and came back in again. So I'll just text her quick. Hi,
Okay,
Rachel. Hey,
thanks.
Rachel. Rachel Mass, that is. There's
There's
mine.
Marlene. Yeah.
Here I am.
I see I see Rachel's image, but I don't hear her yet. So hopefully she's
Okay.
around. Well, I'm just gonna have to edit out these first like three
Right.
minutes of me frantically looking at the screen. But
Oh,
How are they recorded?
Rachel, if you're
yes.
on, check to make sure you're not muted. Rachel Mass, that is.
Mm-hmm.
She is muted. I can see on her.
Yeah, she's muted. Rachel, you're muted, so we can't hear you. I'm
Let me
gonna
send,
text her.
let me send her a text.
Okay, you got it. Okay.
Um,
Well,
Oh, God.
she's in on the right one. We probably weren't there,
right.
but
Yep.
uh, we'll get it all figured out. This is good. What was different about this, Rachel?
I'm not exactly sure what I did.
See, I hate when that happens when you don't know.
I no, I think it was something because I pre-scheduled it and then I went to click in on it and it just took me to a normal hangout. But this is a live broadcast because it has live at the bottom. So we are live on air right now. So it's all good.
Okay.
It's all good. Well, let's just have a little pause here to gather our thoughts, and then I'm just going to jump in, and it'll also give me a little bit of time to like edit out all this stuff before that. So,
Okay.
all right, here we go. Well, hello, welcome to the Gathering Place podcast. I'm Rachel Gerber, your host for today, and we are so thrilled to have Marlene Frankenfeld and Merv Stoltzfus joining us today for our very first initial podcast here through the Gathering Place. So welcome, Merv and Marlene. It's good to have you here with us. And this month we are talking about Sabbath and self-care, and we realize that we love our youth and we love working for the church and their faith formation and development, and yet it is also an all-encompassing, taxing thing as well. And so it's oftentimes, I think, in these it's hard to find the balance, and with life going on and work, and how do we stop and find that Sabbath when we work on Sundays as ministering people, and what does self-care look like in the midst, because we realize that we really can't offer and do spiritual formation work with our youth if we ourselves are also not being rooted and grounded in God's love. So that's what we are going to talk about today. And like I said, Merv and Marlene, thrilled to have you with us. And yeah, let's just jump on into it. Does that sound like a good idea?
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Great. Well, maybe just to start off, why don't you tell us all a little bit about yourself? You're a part of the Gathering Place network as spiritual directors, but you're also longtime youth ministry workers, which is an awesome combination. And we're so thrilled that you, are partnering with us to offer spiritual direction to our networks here. So what got you into spiritual direction, and why is Sabbath and self-care important in the midst of it?
Okay. I had been involved in youth ministry for many years, had worked as a lay leader for a while through my college years and out of college a few years, and then I worked congregational as a youth pastor. Been involved many years in youth ministry, and then also on the conference level as a conference youth minister. So many years of teaching, giving lots of time, crazy hours, serving. And I think at some point I was starting to fatigue, getting tired of the schedule, maybe bored with myself and what I knew, and wanting much more than that, and feeling like there was something more that I was missing, and that there could be a stronger foundation that I actually lived and breathed out of, that would actually make life even feel more full or more joyous, as you give away in ministry. And so I was seeking, looking around, digging more, reading more. And during that time, Mike Yaconelli was still alive, and he used to do a lot of crazy stuff with youth specialties and have these couple-day types of resource events, and he was always a crazy man. And then all of a sudden he did this switch, and he wanted to bring in more spiritual formation, and he put into place a silent retreat down in Nashville, Tennessee, at what we lovingly call Scary Bennett, which is that's not what it's called, but
It's scary.
But we called it Scary Bennett.
And scary.
I signed up for that along with Marlene Frankenfield and Kurt Weaver, and we went to our first silent retreat, which I think we're all looking for something different and trying to find something more. And that was a beginning, an actual happening. That week was amazing in many ways, and also puzzling and frustrating, because it was a silent retreat, so there was many quiet times you weren't supposed to talk. We had opportunity for group spiritual direction. We were in a group together, a peer group, and we also had times for individual spiritual direction. And quiet time each day that you were supposed to be quiet. Some of us did that well, some of us didn't. It was a great experience for me, though, and that sort of really projected me into digging deeper and looking into spiritual direction, reading more from those who did spiritual direction. And the more I read, the more I experienced, the more I wanted to learn and experience. And then eventually, the more I wanted to encourage others to do it, because I found so much life in this. After taking the risk to open myself in some new ways, there was so much life in it that gave me a lot of hope. And I thought other people need to take this risk too. How can I help that happen?
What did that life look like or feel like? Like, how did you know that life was there waiting for you?
Well, it took some time, I guess, but it was a sense of like, you know what, maybe what I bought into in youth ministry all these years, that it's so important to teach all the right things and be the right kind of example and to work hard and to serve. And somehow I need to figure out how to do that. Like, there's something about ministry that requires you, if you want to do well, to be a self-starter. So a lot of that can hinge on you, what you got, what you are, what you bring to the table, so as far as gifts and skills. And so there's that piece of being in on that, and then realizing that's not enough. And it took some years for me, like maybe all along I knew it, but it took years that I wanted to actually live out of a different well. And so it felt peaceful to realize there is a well there when you take the risk to open yourself. It is risky to open yourself to God. So
isn't that ironic?
Yeah. Many of us pastors struggle to really open ourselves. It's safer to teach people what they ought to be, take scripture and interpret it and then share it. But it's a little more scary to open yourself, which is why Scary Bennett became Scary Bennett, because we were opening ourselves.
I'm just curious.
I have Marlene respond too, but.
Well, sure, absolutely, Marlene. You can jump in here too. I mean, what is it, do you think, that is so scary, that feels, because I mean I can relate with that too. To a certain extent, it is scary to open yourselves up to the unknown, to kind of reveal yourself in other ways to another person. But what have you found in talking with people? Have you seen any threads of what that scary feeling and why we sort of avoid it?
I think it's, I found, as an extrovert, it was just kind of being quiet with yourself, and where you're always talking and you're always with people, and all of a sudden you got to be by yourself and sit with yourself, and who are you and what's in there. And that was the scary part. I mean, Merv and I have had, we've had a long journey together, and we've done a lot of these experiences together. And I remember early on when the Institute for Youth Ministry at Princeton was just starting, and I hopped in on that and went through the three years, and they had a capstone retreat, and it was a silent retreat, and that was like my first experience. Mm-hmm. And we all went there, and I remember they had a Catholic nun, spiritual director, that introduced us to this, and the men slept in one room, women in the other, in bunks, and we had to be silent all night till the next morning at breakfast, and then we ended with worship and communion. I didn't sleep all night, because I couldn't talk.
Was it because you were trying not to snore, right? No.
We were all putting our things away, and in the morning, everybody's in and out of the bathroom and looking, and something powerful happened where you're looking people in the eye, you're being present, but without saying words, and it was scary. And after that communion service was over, I reflected back on it. I thought that was the best time of my life. Mm-hmm. But when you're in it, there is something that happens and it's hard to explain, but in that silence, something shifts and something changes. And, I think those experiences then just wanted me to want more. And then, we all went to the scary, Kurt Weaver and Merv and I, Kurt's in Portland now, we all went together. And, there was something comforting about being there with people you knew. Sure. But there was also a long period of time where you had to be alone. And it was right next to Vanderbilt University, and I remember just walking that university with all the people, but not talking, but just feeling like I had to be with people. So it's hard to explain what happens, but when you start emptying yourself is when you can experience God's Spirit and God, speaking to you and getting to know who the true self is, what's in there, mm-hmm. without all the noise and without your family and without your ministry and that defining you. Like, who are you without that? Who are you just with mm-hmm. being rather than the doing?
Yeah. Sort of who you are at the core.
Yeah.
Yeah, stripped apart of, if you want to say, the ego, that right.
Mm-hmm.
that where you're defined by what you do or what you produce or whose mm-hmm. daughter or whose whatever you are. Yeah, that's really interesting. How would you both suggest, thinking from the youth pastor here, right? And youth pastors have crazy schedules. Let's just be real. They do. Their work during the day, they work late at night, they work on weekends, they work all the time. How, and a lot of them have families, and it's just like, you just don't know sort of how to catch up. How do you walk with people who are seeking and longing for that well, to find that well, to uncover sort of their true self, and yet also struggling just to really find the time?
Part of the difficulty is, I'll address two things. One is personality type of some fairly significant percentage of youth leaders. Um, Tends to be quite a few youth leaders that are fairly effective with youth tend to be more extroverted in nature, and okay with new experiences and being with new people, and you need to find a way to do that because you have youth you don't know, and then they're bringing friends occasionally, and there's all these experiences of newness all the time in youth ministry. So you often the person maybe has a personality type that is more extroverted and not even always the great administrators, but they're very persons that are very good at communicating with youth and just being with them. But in their own nature, maybe not as readily interested or adept at being quiet. So then they're going to have an internal battle to believe that this is worth it. And maybe you have to be a youth leader for a number of years and get to a point where you realize you're not enough. You try to be enough over and over again, and then you look for it. Other people look quicker. So I've had the occasion of a few people through the years that seem to be looking for resource beyond themselves early on. What's been impressive to me about that is how much quicker they grow in their own personhood and who they are and their capacities. So that again kind of reassures me that it's worth talking about and encouraging people, but someone has to come to this on their own terms, actually. The other piece here, though, that I want to address is, as Mennonites, we believe in service and community and doing things, that more so than being. So this idea of spiritual direction and spiritual formation is rather new among us in some ways. I mean, some have begun this quite a while ago, but now it's more common. More people would actually understand what spiritual direction might look like today than they did 10 years ago. So it is really coming to be more familiar with us today. But it's not necessarily, I remember years ago, maybe 15, 20 years ago, we were working so hard with youth groups when they do service trips, instead of going to some place to show people how much you can work and how hard you can work and how much you can get done, we're inviting people in to respect the people, to be with them, to have conversation with them as part of their experience too. And that was that wasn't readily accepted at first. But that took some work among conference youth ministry people and others to start changing that paradigm of understanding what happens when we do service projects. And it's not that we were bad people, it's just that our mode of operation was to do things. So this is completely in a different place. So understanding the value of quieting self and that something great might happen into that could be a very new idea for somebody.
What does it look like to quiet oneself? What sort of practical things would you say to someone seeking spiritual direction of, how do you tap into that every day? Because really, like youth pastors, pastors in general, they work on Sundays, which is, the typical Sabbath that, maybe you grew up taking, that Sunday was your day of rest, but, that all changes once you start working for the church. And so where do you find that space to sort of,
Why don't you go first on that one?
Okay, I think in spiritual direction, one of the first questions that I usually ask is just starting out with, what's your image of God? Kind of where's your starting point? How do you experience God? And I think, we all experience God in a different way. One of the things that has been really helpful to me, Charles Shelton, it's an old Youthman textbook. He had these 4 ways to experience God, which is nature, relationship, crisis, and insight, which he calls, it's the arts. It's art, movies, music, dreams, the creativity. And just to break it down and find, for somebody that is so busy and they're saying, I really want to spend the time and connect more into who God is for me, where do you start sometimes? Even though you're in ministry, doesn't mean that, you have this connection going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so that has been really, it has been helpful for me personally. Where are those places where I intersect with the Holy One, the Divine? And or maybe it's just starting to, at night, when you lay your head on the pillow, to just kind of examine your day. What am I grateful for? Where did I experience God? And where was I not my best self today? And where could I have done better? Or and just kind of give that up at the end of your day, and start small. Or I still believe in quiet meditation, even though that's something I struggle with. I'll set my cell phone on the timer just because, so I'm not looking, okay, how much time have I done already, so, and oftentimes if it's 30 minutes, my phone rings and I go, wow, I just sat here for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
In my mind, I can soon say how unproductive that was. I'm not doing anything. But there is something that happens in how you respond to others, how you handle stress, how, by having that time, I feel like, there's a shift and a change. And it's powerful. You can have, you can fill your mind with all the knowledge and know a lot, but there's something in just being that shifts and changes.
A quote that I just thought of as Mara was talking is from Forbes Robinson. And, in youth ministry, we talk a lot about how we need to love the youth, we need to love the kids, we need to love their families, their parents, we need to love, love, love. But something Forbes Robinson says, and I might not have this totally right because I don't have it written down here, but he says, in order to serve and care for people, we must love them. And to love them, we need to pray. And that makes a lot of sense to me because something that Marcus Smucker had shared with me years ago, so often we're going into a meeting or to a setting with youth or with their parents or church leaders or somebody like that, some kind of setting like that. We're going into something and you go in and maybe you just go in with all the tools you have and how much you know. But something that Marcus used to say, like, could you invite God into that? What would it feel like to believe that you could team with God as you walk into that meeting place or that situation? Now, as humans, we tend to think of this more when they're going to be a difficult type of conversation, maybe.
Right.
But I think that's a really good play. That's something I started practicing after he mentioned that to me. The idea of inviting God into a space I was going to, so that I didn't have to go to. It's unbelievable over time how that has relaxed me, and I have more of a calmness, sense of peace walking in all kinds of situations today. But the idea that God might team with me or team with you, that you are not alone, and God was there before you went into the space, God's going to be there in the space, and God will be there with these people after you walk out of the space. This is not yours to fix or make happen. You are teaming with God. That's amazing what that does. But just quickly to address the other, sometimes we think in our busyness we just don't even have time to stop and pray or think and all that. But the busier we are, actually the more we need this space, so that what we do is grounded more in something beyond ourselves. We make far more mistakes when we're trying to keep up with our busyness than if we actually take, and maybe one, instead of saying, you hear these stories, I'll just name it, of people like, if you're really spiritual, you'll get up at 4 in the morning, you'll pray from 4 to 6, to prepare for your day. Well, the average youth leader is not going to get there. That's just going to produce guilt for them, that they are never spiritual enough. So, maybe we need to carve out 15 minutes and see how that works, and see what kind of changes that brings, and you build into it. Why do you have to, we shouldn't make this so difficult that you must do such a large block of time that it just is almost unimaginable for somebody. So take out a small time, and just for example, it's something I've been working at for a couple of years, and that is just to empty self. And this is really against probably everything that I learned growing up in my culture in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. But to not, this is not meditating. This is emptying your brain and yourself to nothingness to allow space for whatever God brings in. Well, that is about as crazy can be, what that can feel like. And what the persons talk about, they have written and experienced this for many years, is the average person can't make it more than about 2 seconds before they start a rabbit trail. So the failure rate's very high, but over time, and I just did it this morning. I had a little bit of time, and I thought, you know what? I'm just going to sit down and take it easy and just try to empty myself from all these thoughts that are already flying in my head and clear my head. Well, I did that, and then I fell asleep, and I woke up about 20 minutes later. I don't even feel bad about that. I felt so much better. And that's just what I want to say. Like, sometimes we empty ourselves, we actually rest, and then I was ready to get in here to the office and work in a completely different mindset than I was previously. There's the value, but I think finding those practices and
That's awesome. That's awesome. I the campus pastor at Eastern Mennonite Seminary, where I went to seminary, Wendy Miller, she used to, when she would lead our spiritual formation classes and stuff and invite us into these meditative practices, she would always say, now if you fall asleep, don't worry. She's like, there's no better place than to sleep with God, it's so true. It's so true. I love how you said that, Merv, about, getting to that place where you need to be. I mean, and sort of how that impacts the rest of your life, especially like you said about, when you go into a meeting, like, is there space for God? God's already there. How are you inviting yourself to partner with God? Which leads to this integrated self, I think, of where you're living life is a prayer, where, you find these moments of Sabbath these regenerative moments throughout your day, whether it's however small or how large it is. And I think that's really, I think, what it means to, awaken to the holy presence in your life on a day-to-day basis. Yeah.
I think sometimes, we have this mindset that if we care for ourselves, then we may not be caring for others. Like taking that time for ourselves, especially in ministry when it's so much about caring, and in youth ministry when kids have access to you, 24/7 through text, or they can get a hold of you. And, how do you respond to those needs? And how do you set those boundaries, in ministry where you're modeling boundaries, to youth and parents. And just because you can be reached 24/7, doesn't mean that, you have to respond. And some people in your congregation understand that, and some kids will understand that, and some won't. And I think there's a balance in that. I think some people can have too many boundaries up. So I think you have to find your own rhythm in that. But I think you have to pay attention to that. I think it's a real discipline in ministry, and especially youth ministry, to take that time and set those boundaries,
What does... Oh, go ahead, Murph.
I was going to name two. I think, usually youth leaders, whether they're lay or staff or whatever, they're not doing this. Nobody's signed up for this unless they care about youth. So that's probably a given. So they're caring, and maybe sometimes persons are lean towards seeing youth around them as a bunch of projects that they need to help fix. Because it's really easy. I mean, if your eyes are open, you can always see things that need work, and you love these kids, so that's there. But we seem to understand that there would be a value to care for other people, but how can we recognize, again, finding the right balance, but we too are projects that need some work. And so as we do our own work, we will be better equipped, I think, to help others do their work. And you're not taking away from other people to do your own work. You're actually preparing yourself so that you will be better engaged with them when you are with them and you do your own work.
Yeah, that's neat. I mean, I think being engaged is so important, you know. I mean, and yet, like Marlene also said, you know, that boundary. What do those boundaries look like? How do you help people find those boundaries?
Well,
Go ahead.
yeah, no, go ahead. You go.
I mean, I think it's different for everybody. I think it all depends, you know, your family life, if you have small children, if, you know, if you're single. I mean, I think each person has to figure that out. And I mean, I think it's good to have other people to help you with that. Um, I mean, one of the things I think that's most important in youth ministry is surrounding yourself with support people, and you know, not being a lone ranger in this, and not being alone, because I think that's when you do, you know, head towards burnout and feel like you don't have a lot of reserve going on, and even to have people help you that, and oftentimes your supervisor or the senior pastor or whoever that is not going to help you with that. You know, you're the one that's going to have to kind of bring that up, and you know, they're not often asking, you know, okay, how much time have you taken for yourself this week? You know, and you know, so I think that's something that you really have to, I mean, it's a real discipline for yourself to say, you know what, quality of life for me, and what that is. And I think each person comes out on that different. I mean, I look back on it, you know, my kids, you know, when I was in the thick of youth ministry and I wasn't even full time, which I wasn't paid full time, but I did full time, you know, I kind of ate, drank, and slept it, and it was woven through my whole life. I mean, I didn't have a lot of boundaries with it. I mean, my kids would probably tell you that now. And you know, I look back on that and I think, you know, that wasn't healthy, but I was just trying to be the best youth ministry I could be, and be all that and more. And you know, it wasn't healthy. It wasn't healthy for my family. Um, you know, and so I think each person has to kind of come to terms with that. And oftentimes we look back on it and reflect, and that's when we can see it. And I can see that now. When I was in it, no, I was trying to be all that and more. You know, and have everybody like me, and all the kids like me and everything, and I was going to be heroic at it, you know.
Oh, I know that one hits close to home for me. That's for sure. You know,
Yeah.
it's been a really busy last few weeks here, and not to turn this into a therapy session at all, but you know, one of my
Can offer spiritual direction, you know.
That's right, absolutely. One of my boys the other day, I felt like I was on the computer again, and he's like, "Mom, I can't wait till you retire," and I'm like, "Oh."
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think those paying attention to those cues from your own family members, and having the courage really to be able to step back and say, you know, what is healthy, and how can I create those boundaries? Because I always feel like it was interesting, Murph, how you said, you know, it was hard for you to sleep, or you know, sort of you had a lot of things going on in your mind. A couple nights ago, I was sort of in that same mode, wondering, you know, a million thoughts rushing through my mind, and the Lord's, Psalm 23, you know, came to mind, and I was like, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, and I just repeated that, and you know, just even repeating that phrase, it got me to a different point. The Lord is my shepherd. You know what I mean? I am not the shepherd. I am not God. Do I trust in a God that holds all things together? You know, it's not up to me. You know, God's the shepherd, I'm the sheep. God's the host, I'm the server. You know, God, it's not up to me. And that is a really freeing thought, to be able to get to that place, to be like, you know, I don't have to hold everything together. I'm just I'm a part of, you know, of what God is doing in the world, and you know, however big or little of a part that is, that's great. But I'm not God, and I think for me that was really freeing. Yeah, as far as finding Sabbath and self-care in the midst of the work, you know.
We do need we need these times to step back away, and we need more than what we probably believe that we need. And the idea that it is God that will see us through. Maybe after you experience life a little bit longer and some really hard stuff, you understand that better. But it seems to me we as a church could culture a different understanding about how we live life. And
Say more.
Well, in the sense that the more that we can open ourselves to understanding, as you said, the Lord is my shepherd and the Lord is doing this, that we open ourselves to being okay with times with God, that is our foundation for whatever we may face. Most people, sooner or later in life, are going to face something, and often multiple things, that are just beyond your capacity to deal with on your own. And so to believe that we don't need to live our life from our own personal foundation of who we are, but we can go beyond self, to nurture that will just prepare us for a much more stable and centered life in God. And I think people will see that in us. And we will actually be more effective in shorter time periods. And the time will not be wasted. The time will turn into culturing something that we don't even understand before we do it. And so it's so valuable, I think, to have this understanding that God is teaming with us. God is with us. And that is what we can function out of in exciting ways. And so when the day is exciting, we realize it's not all about us and what we did. When the day is really hard, we know it's not just this moment and this is not the end all of life, but there's a way through it. We begin understanding there's a way through these things. And we have the courage to go through them in a different way. And it doesn't release us of pain and struggle and all that stuff. Those things will all be part of what we do and experience. But I think it's the level of how we experience that stuff that changes greatly. And so while it may be hurtful and a struggle, it's not so entirely devastating of our semblance of life. Because we realize God is with us in this stuff. We don't have to figure it all out. But there's a way through, and there'll be another day. So helpful in that. And that's the basic piece of finding joy in life, I think, for any of us, is understanding that.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Because, you know, those difficult times and moments in life, they don't define who we are. You know, God defines who we are, and to be able to separate that is so important. Thanks for sharing that.
I've been saying for years, I don't want to end up being a grouchy old man. That's the humor of it, but you know, there are a lot of grouchy old people, men and women, and they get defined by difficult things that they face that weren't fair and weren't just, and it wasn't right, and they get defined by that. And so I don't want to be that person. So that's probably another reason that intrigued me to go to some other foundation and find something more in life than just what I know, and open myself to what God has that's beyond what I know. And it allows you to roll with life in a very different way. It's just a very different way of taking the good and the bad, and still being able to see that life is beautiful and the opportunities are great, and you're not alone. And not being alone and understanding that is probably one of the strongest foundations that we need as humans. The idea that we are not alone.
And the only way to find or to discover that not aloneness is by, like you said, digging deep into that well of knowing that of who God is and how God comes to us. Got a question here from Rachel about how have you engaged in your own sort of work rest rhythm, what spiritual practices have you found meaningful in your life, like silent retreats, prayers? What are some other disciplines that have been meaningful for you? Could you talk a little bit more about that? You said a lot about silent retreats, but what other things have you found?
Yeah, like I try to do this silence thing here, and it's an ongoing practice for me. I mean, it's not something that I have perfected. Um, I'm a little bit ADD, so I kind of get tired of things, so I have to have like switch it up because I'm not a kind of same old person. And my stuff is kind of random. I even look at, going out and playing golf as just something of being, out in nature, and it's kind of an individual thing, and it kind of tells you a lot about yourself, just in your own frustration with yourself
Your
and
patience, yeah.
going back at it, and patience. Yeah, I mean, it takes so much patience. Some of the other things that I have done, just in I know for a while I was walking the labyrinth. There was a church close by that had one. I don't even think they used it that much. It was kind of out on their patio outside their church, and I would just show up there randomly. I'd be driving by, and if I had some time, I'd stop and I'd go in and walk the labyrinth. And that's just kind of like a random thing. And so I try to kind of incorporate spontaneous, stuff into, but it's not something that I have this every morning I do this, or every morning I get up and I do yoga, or every morning, I do breathing exercises, or it's kind of random. And then I think I'm in tune to myself enough to know that all of a sudden it's like, yeah, I ought to get back into doing something. And I think it's knowing yourself, paying attention, I think,
And
to your
not feeling
mind
guilty, and not feeling guilty too.
and your mind, body, spirit. And I think, and the other thing that I have realized, how much guilt, I call it pulling the trailer of guilt. And how do you work at unhooking that trailer? And so part of my two goals right now is to live guilt-free and to be content. And, really, when you think about that, when you make a decision to do something or not, or not be there for somebody, and oftentimes we have these shoulds that come our way. We should do this, and, and we don't really want to, and out of that can create anger and all kinds of stuff. So really, to just kind of pause and say, is this decision going to leave me with guilt? And how can I make this decision? And it can be really small stuff, family stuff, or grandkids, or whatever it is, of not being there for somebody, or whatever it is. Am I going to be left with guilt? And if I am, well, my goal is to live guilt-free. So I'm going to try to make a decision where I'm not going to have guilt. And that has been amazing, freeing, and living with an inner peace that I have not experienced, before. And which leads to contentment, just an inner contentment. And so I think that guilt, and people that I meet with, people carry a lot of guilt of the shoulds, or whatever it is in life that we hang on to, that can be from a long time ago, but you still have a guilt, you still have some sort of guilt with it. And then that totally affects your true self and who you are, and how do you, what do you live out of, and even in ministry, then what you're giving. I think guilt is one of those things that's a huge obstacle for people to work through, and even for myself.
Something I love to do. I just love to sit on the porch. So late at night. Sometimes I'll be out there instead of going to bed. It might be 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. I'm thinking this is ridiculous. I'm going to hate this tomorrow morning, but I love to sit on the porch. And it's something I've probably done for years and didn't know I was doing it for my own health that much at one point. Just it was a place where it's a way of letting go the day, maybe another way of letting go the day. So that's one that's really helpful for me. And that's just a quiet time on the porch, just hanging out. Just sitting there, not even trying to think, just enjoying the darkness or the evening or what's going on around me at the moment. Any of those work. Another practice I like is I do like reading scripture, but I don't necessarily always read scripture. So I often set goals. This year I had set goals to read scripture, read through the Gospels, and some years I've set goals to read a lot more scripture that's more demanding. Then it can become like work after a while, and so then it's not, maybe it's good but can be unhelpful if the goal is too high. This year I thought I'm going to read the Gospels, and I'll just read them from time to time, whenever I have time. I'll keep reading the same ones over again. If going through the year, I found that really helpful. Like for too many years, I think I was so caught up in being a youth pastor and getting ready for Wednesday night's youth group and Sunday morning Sunday school and all the extra stuff that I was reading the scripture so I could tell kids what they would be best for them to think. But I wasn't nurturing myself. And so, upon recognizing that, I tried to use scripture in other ways, just for me, not for the next lesson. Boy, it's hard to sit down with scripture and not have a notepad right there or something. In case you get a really great idea, you want to outline something really quick because you might need that next week. But just to be there in the moment and enjoy it, that's a different way of breaking the rest of the rhythm of life for your own nourishment. I like doing examine at the end of the day. I don't always do it. I don't have a regular practice. Perhaps I'm not as ADD as Mara is, but I still don't. I don't like doing the same thing every day. I don't like having a defined schedule, like week after week, the same schedule. I'm not a person who goes on a trip and wants to map out every stop along the way. I don't want to map out any. I want to just have them happen as they do. I don't want to be in a schedule because enough of my life is scheduled anyway. So I've worked at practices in that light instead of thinking I need to discipline myself and then feel guilty if I don't discipline myself enough. I've tried to fit things in, like quiet spaces, and you can find quiet time in the middle of complete chaos once you learn how to do it. You don't have to be in this quiet room that's soundproof. You can do quiet space in the middle of a large group. I can. I'll just say for myself, I can do quiet space in the middle of a large group. And I've worked with that. I can just kind of check out and go on a trail, and when I come back out of that, something shifts. There's a shift, and it helps. So the different prayer practices. Again, I can get bored with one prayer practice, but using a variety of prayer practices are helpful to me. Times when I might just take the subject matter and meditate on that. But really, quite frankly, the last couple of years, because of the nature of my schedule and the variety of things I'm involved in, I like empty space, just trying to clear my head and let it be empty, and have found incredible amount of, I don't know, peace in that, I guess would be the word I'd say. And it seems to change what I do after the quiet space. So that I just find very interesting. I also like to read regularly Nowlin and Rohr and Darcy and Creuset and Rupp and others, just tidbits from their experiences and what they've learned and what they have to share. And again, it's my way of going beyond self to hear some thoughts of others and then sitting with them as I have time for my own good.
So rich, so rich. I think that's the thread that I hear both of you saying that I really connect with is to know ourselves and to know how God has created us best to connect with God, and to leave that guilt behind. I think that's so I don't know, I think a lot of people, myself included, can struggle with that from time to time, thinking that we should be doing something more, we should be doing something differently, or, X, Y, and Z. But to just be present and to offer gratitude for how God created us unique individuals in our own unique ways of connecting is truly something to embrace, and not to sort of squish into a little box of what we think it should look like. So that's incredibly freeing to hear that. Yeah.
A favorite quote of mine, it's become a favorite quote of mine, it's by Richard Rohr. I just want to share it because I think it has to do with how you get to yourself to a place of finding more openness and healing. But he says this: to finally surrender ourselves to healing, we have to have three spaces opened up in us: our opinionated head, and our closed down heart, and our defensive and defended body. That is the work of spirituality. It is the work of a power greater than ourselves, and it will lead to great luminosity and depth in seeing. We often don't believe it's worth the cost, but yet it is. New understandings, the value of being healthy, and importance of knowing self so that we can minister to others is personally life-changing.
What's that from? That's great.
I just find that really helpful, the idea of that we have this opinionated head, and we have a closed-down heart, and we have a defensive and defended body, and we need healing from all three of those areas. And we have to, it's surrender. I think surrender is a good word. It's not one I necessarily like so much, but surrendering ourselves to that work will help us see more clearly what is happening around us.
And that's the beauty of spiritual direction, and that's the beauty of what you and Marlene offer to the Gathering Place community, which folks, get out there and get together with these gifts out here that are here for you. It is life changing, as you take that courageous step to walk with someone on this journey. So absolutely, man, this has been fun. Can we do this again sometime?
Sure.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, that's great. Are there any last minute things you want to say? About what we talked about today, or
I'll just end with the one quote as I think of spiritual direction, and I think of people that have listened to me over the years, and also now as listening to others. It's by Douglas Steer, who's a Quaker author, and he says, to listen to another soul into a condition of disclosure and discovery may be the greatest service that any human being ever performs for another. And I think that's, where I get my passion in spiritual direction, is just to listen to another as they discover who they are, and how they connect spiritually to something higher than themselves or the Holy One, and just to ask those questions and to be the person to listen to them as they discover it. It's really nothing we do other than listen to those those nudgings that they have to continue to get that deeper within them, and just to walk with them. And so to me, it is just, it's an honor, and it's a holy ground to be with somebody. Yeah.
Probably what I would offer, Rachel, is something from the early Christian fathers and mothers, and they knew this, they learned this, and they insisted that for us to find inner rest and quiet, it's necessary to tame the obsessive mind. And what they meant by that was they have this other piece to this regarding how we think in our mind, how we get in our head. But they said, when you're in your mind, you're hardly ever at peace. And when you're at peace, you're never only in your mind. Henry Nouwen picks up on it and says this, and I think it's helpful as we think about wanting to become somebody new, being born a new creature in God, in Christ. And he says, as a place of conversion, the place where the old self dies and the new self is born, the place where the emergence of the new man and the new woman occurs, is a place where there's solitude and a courageous encounter with our most raw and real self in the presence of pure love.
Hmm. That's what it's about. It's about connecting to that pure love right there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think once we get a taste of that, we're really never the same.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, dear friends, thank you so much for giving us an hour or so of your time. And yeah, like I said, Merv and Marlene have both connected with the Gathering Place to offer spiritual direction, and you can find links to their email addresses to connect with them to see if it'd be a good fit. All you need is a computer, a webcam, a phone. There's a lot of different ways to connect with them to do this spiritual direction. So check it out, and you won't be disappointed. So, but thanks to both of you for giving yourself and your wisdom and walking with us, encouraging us as ministering persons find that time to connect with the holy and find again our true selves in the presence of God. So blessings to you, and until next time, we'll see you. Thanks again. Okay, bye.
Bye.